communities that aren't very well served by public transportation, for example. This doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If we were thinking about this in a global sense, we'd say, oh, there's the rail lines. These would be the communities that we want to see more development happening in. And it is happening in some places. You see some of the work happening in Somerville and other communities where there are mixed income development properties being built that help to create that kind of dynamic. But it is something the state has to be looking at, and again, a very strategic way, and saying there's land available. The MBTA owns land next to its rail lines. There's a lot of building that can happen there. The Mass Pike does too. And we can think about how to grow as the state starts to re-urbanize in many areas. You think about city centers like in places like Salem and Lowell, even in Worcester, where there's a bit of a revitalization happening because people want to move there. And they create opportunities for us to build the type of housing that could be needed for people to be able to afford to live in our state.
Public safety. Where do you come down on public safety? And the need, when you look at the marathon event with the bombing and so on and so forth, in the city of Boston, I believe we've had at least one shooting a day, almost on average since that. Public safety is something that people clearly are very passionate about, really want to protect themselves and their belongings and their loved ones. Where do you come down on that?
Look, it's tragic, the types of things that go on. And they've defied so many efforts to try to resolve these problems. And I think part of the problem we have, and this is not just a Massachusetts issue, it's an American problem, is that we tend to look at all these problems as law enforcement problems. And they're much broader than that. If you take a young person that makes some kind of wrong turn in life as a teenager and they enter the criminal justice system, this is not a place to educate a young person. It is a way to help them make sure they continue on a bad path unless they're able to pull themselves off of it. So too much of what we do is to look at every single problem as a law enforcement problem. There are much more comprehensive approaches to these things that, again, have to start with early education, intervening at an early age to make sure a kid knows how to read. A child who can read by the time they're in 3rd grade is much more likely to graduate high school than one that isn't. We have to start at the earliest stages. But there's so many things along the way where when young people take a wrong turn in life where you can intervene and provide them mentoring and help and other guidance. There's so many great programs out there that are doing this. I visited up in Lowell at UTEC, which works with street workers who go out there and they engage with young people who may or may not be able to be pulled off of that path. But you know what? If just a few of them, if they can just reach out to a few of those kids, it makes a big difference. So we need to be thinking about these things once again in a much more sophisticated way. It isn't just either or. It's not, what we'll do, let's just have more police officers and arrest more people and put them in jail. This isn't a solution to the problem. And it's not easy. It's taken us a long time to be where we are, and it's going to take us some time to get out of, but we have to start. We have to keep working at it. We have to keep trying.
I contend that there needs to be more money available for detox and mental health beds. In my facility, we have become the de facto mental health hospital because a lot of the mental health hospitals have been shut down. We have a lot of folks that should be in detox beds. We have some folks that should have gone through diversionary programs versus being incarcerated. Talk to me, if you're governor, what do you do to address the situation of more money for detox, mental health, and diversionary programs?
These are public health issues, and the fact that we don't treat them in that way. Think about this. If the person had been run over by a car and is lying on the bed with broken bones, on the ground with broken bones, you wouldn't say, oh, you know what we need to do? Let's take this person to a prison and let's incarcerate him until he heals up. This isn't what you would do. With mental health issues, with substance abuse issues, as you're pointing out, that's become the default way of approaching it. And these are not the right settings to treat those kinds of health issues. So, of course, there needs to be more money put into it. But there also needs to be a recognition that it isn't about, hey, let's just increase budget numbers, although we need to, for sure. But there needs to be a different mentality around these things and a recognition that these are public health issues. Substance abuse is a medical issue as much as it is a mental health issue. And it needs to be treated in that way with professionals that know how to treat those issues, not in a prison setting. So I think that getting back to some of the things that we know work would be a very wise approach to how to deal with these issues.
What's a wise approach to healthcare? What's a wise approach to making sure that all of our citizens in what is arguably the richest country on the nation on the planet, where we have so many people that cannot afford quality healthcare? As governor, What would you do about that?
The practices we see in the marketplace that I talked about are the things that are making it so expensive, and they do interfere with the ability of doctors to do their job. By the way, they start to make it so that doctors don't want to be in practice anymore. You hear about a lot of doctors as they get to be in their, their 50s, they say, you know what, I think I'm done here. I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
Young people, do they want to go into medicine? Some of our best and brightest who in one era used to say medicine, that's the place to go. It's not so appealing anymore because they see what the lifestyle is like. Or if they do, they go into specialties as opposed to into primary care where we need them. So this is a burgeoning problem that we have, and Massachusetts is maybe further ahead than the rest of the country in this in terms of how bad that problem has started to progress.
Right.
It starts with saying it's not okay for doctors to have to see 30 patients a day. All right. Unfortunately, from a public policy standpoint, we say, you know what we should do? Let's change some of the incentives around medicine. And I've known in my career a lot of doctors, and I don't think I've ever met a doctor who said to me, I think I'd be a better doctor if only I had an incentive to do it. If someone would pay me more to be a better doctor. That's not how they think.
Right.
They say, I'd be a better doctor if I could see 10 or 15 patients a day instead of 40. I'd be a better doctor if the insurance company or the government would leave me alone and let me practice medicine. So all those things contribute to why the way the policy approach works makes our care more expensive, makes it more difficult for people to access it. And while we've created a system that allows people to have access, makes it easier for them to purchase the health insurance that they need, it's becoming too expensive. And it's becoming out of reach for far too many people in our state. And we can't sit back and allow these things to happen.
When you talk about what's becoming too expensive to afford is a college education. These kids, these young folks are graduating with a mountain of debt. As governor, how would you address that situation so that these kids not only can get out of an undergraduate experience, not owing everything for years, for decades to come, but if they wanted to go to grad school or beyond, it's almost it's a situation where you'd rather not because you're going to be paying for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
How do you deal with that?
It's interesting because think about what happened with the mortgage crisis.
Yep.
Part of what happened is that banks made it really easy for people to borrow money that probably couldn't afford it. And a lot of that was driven by the actions of the government in creating those kinds of markets. Something like that has happened with student loans, where people are taking on all kinds of debt, where they can't afford it. And it's not because the people that are taking the loans are foolish in some way. They just will never be able to make enough money to pay off these loans. I mean, it's a real problem. We've created that kind of a situation. You go and you see these college campuses we have in our state with wonderful buildings and terrific facilities, and a lot of that is because of debt that has been taken on by students. So schools that have these huge endowments, maybe there's ways to say, listen, you need to reduce the amount of financial aid that people are having to take, and maybe increase the amount that you give to students who need it. I think the state should also be making sure it invests much more heavily in community colleges, which can be less expensive and be a great option for a lot of young people, and vocational schools, because not every person wants to necessarily go to a four-year college. And so it's all part of a strategic approach. How do we make it so that it's the 21st century. We're in a different era than we were when a lot of these structures were put into place. How do we make sure that our institutions match up with the realities of our times?
Right. The arts, culture. Boston is, I think, one of the most spectacular cities for the arts and culture. As governor, how would you inspire more artists to stay here, to thrive here, to work here?
Yeah, for me, it's a hugely important topic, and I think the arts are enormously important for everything for children in school. I think creative education is such an important part of it. Think about what we've talked about with small and medium-sized businesses. You need people who are able to be creative thinkers, to be flexible, to understand how to handle whatever it is that the world throws at them. And the arts, acting, painting, whatever it is that a child is into, music, makes a big difference in the way that their brains are developing. And then, of course, as we get to be adults and you say, boy, we really have a much better theater community now in Massachusetts than we did even 20 years ago, where there's been a profusion of this, and we start to see even television shows and movies being filmed here. It's an important part of two different pieces. One of them is economic development. The communities that have a strong arts backing are able to grow more and to attract more people from around the country to want to be here.
Right.
And we have no shortage of creative people in Massachusetts, just unfortunately a lot of them leave.
Right.
And the other thing is just from the culture of a city. I think if we can do things that make it less expensive to live here, create areas in which people who are artists can thrive and do their art in a setting in which it's affordable for them to display it, to perform it, be supported by the community as they do it. Because there's a lot of people here who really love supporting the arts. So I think it's one of the most important things for us to think about when we think about that aspect of our economy and about that aspect of our future in Massachusetts. It's a really important area.
You know, one of the things I remember being in elementary school, actually, and in middle school, you did have music, you did have arts, you had wood shop, you know, you had physical education. And I think in the absence of social studies, or what we call civics now, in the absence of those, I'd hate to say, but I don't know that you come out, yeah, of course you do. You come out as a rounded person, but you're not, I don't think, as fully rounded as you could be if you were afforded the opportunity to be exposed to those things.
Absolutely.
And I think it's somewhat tragic that those things have been taken away. Would you work very aggressively as governor to make sure that schools put those courses back into their curriculum?
I think it's a greatly important thing, and you know my family, my brother works in the arts. He's the co-creator of the television program Glee, and so
no kidding.
Yeah, so I've been around this,
Right.
and you know they're clearly in his own way working on in the schools with music and art. But I think it's a wonderful example because you think about how popular that program has been. It's tapping into something, and young people love the idea of being able to use art and as a way of expression.
Right.
So yes, it's something that it's close to me, and I think it's something that'll be very important for what I'll do as governor.
So listen, we've got about a minute or so left. What I want you to do is look into that camera over there, and I want you to talk to the folks that are watching and tell them why they should consider giving you their vote to be the next governor of the Commonwealth.
Thank you. I will do that. The voters know in Massachusetts that they will be better off if we've got an independent governor that isn't tied to the Democratic or Republican parties or to the interests that fuel those parties. This is what leadership is about. Leadership is about being able to articulate a vision for the future, being able to explain to voters why it's important to them, how it matters to your life, and to build consensus around those kinds of solutions. So as we go through this election campaign, I think it's enormously important to treat it almost as if it were a long public job interview. Listen to what candidates have to say. Listen to what I have to say about what my vision is for the future, how I'm able to explain why it's important to you in your life that we see new independent leadership in our state, and to start the process of building consensus around the kinds of solutions we want to see.
So listen, I know this is going to be a long race. What do you have, 8, 9, 10 months, 11 months to go? We wish you the best of luck. Love to have you come back at some point in the future to tell us how it's going out there on the road, and we wish you Godspeed.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, folks, look, that's it for today's show. We had 2 extraordinary guests, and it's been a blast, and it's been an honor for me to sit with both of these gentlemen to talk about the issues of importance to you. We're out of here. We're out of time. We'll be back again next week, and so until then, you take care of yourself. Peace.